My name is Emma Carter. I'm 28 years old now.
But the truth is, I stopped being a child the night my father looked me in the eye and said,
Get out. I don't need a sick daughter like you.
it was raining so hard that night, it sounded like the sky was breaking apart above our house in Willow Creek. The windows shook, the wind howled through the cracks, and I stood there 15 years old, shaking, confused, trying to understand how my life had just ended in one sentence, because that's what it felt like. Not punishment, not anger, erasure. My mother didn't stop him. That part hurt more than the words. She sat on the couch, holding my younger sister, Hannah, who was crying into her shoulder like she was the one being hurt. Like she was the victim in the story everyone had already decided to believe. And me? I was just the problem. If you've ever felt like the truth didn't matter in your own home, stay with me. Because what happened that night didn't start there. It started years before. See, every family has something they don't talk about. Something hidden behind smiles and holiday photos. In my family, the family secret was simple. Hannah's feelings mattered. Mine didn't. When I was 11, I won first place at a regional science fair. I built a water filtration system using basic materials, something I had worked on for weeks. I remember running home, breathless, holding that blue ribbon like it was proof that I mattered. Mom, I won! She turned, smiled, started to reach for me. Then Hannah walked in behind me, crying. I messed up my dance. Everyone laughed at me. And just like that, I disappeared. My mother dropped her arms and went to Hannah instead. Oh, baby, it's okay. I stood there with my ribbon in my hand. No one asked to see it. That was the moment I learned something I didn't have words for yet. In our house, love followed the loudest pain, and Hannah knew exactly how to be loud. As we got older, it became clearer. I learned to celebrate quietly, to need less, to take up less space. When I got accepted into a summer science program with a full scholarship, I thought maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. It wasn't. Hannah cried because she wasn't going anywhere that summer. So I stayed home. Family comes first, my mother said, but what she meant was, Hannah comes first. That was another version of our family secret, one nobody said out loud, but everyone followed. Then the lies started. At first they were small. A missing sweater, a broken vase, a rumor at school. Every time, somehow, it came back to me. And every time, my parents believed her. There was one moment I'll never forget. $50 went missing from my mom's wallet. Hannah said she saw me near it. I hadn't touched it, but that didn't matter. My father called me into his study. Did you take it? No. Hannah says you did. She's lying. That was the worst thing I could have said. His face changed instantly. Don't accuse your sister. I lost my phone. I lost my trust. I lost my voice in that house. And when my parents weren't looking, Hannah smiled at me. That smile. It told me everything. She knew she could get away with it. That was the moment I realized the truth behind our family secret. This wasn't about misunderstanding. This was about choice. They were choosing her. Over and over again. By the time I was 15, I had stopped defending myself. Because what was the point? When people decide who you are without listening, the truth becomes useless. And then came the final push. His name was Adrian Cole. He was in my chemistry class. Nice, awkward, terrible at equations. I helped him study after school a few times. That was it. But Hannah liked him. Not casually, obsessively. And when she saw him talking to me one afternoon, something in her changed. That night she was quiet. Too quiet. And if you've ever dealt with someone like that, you know silence isn't peace. It's planning. 2 days later, the storm came. And so did her performance. I was upstairs doing homework when I heard her crying downstairs. Loud, broken, desperate. Then my father's voice cut through the house. Emma, get down here, now. My stomach dropped. I walked downstairs slowly, and the moment I stepped into the living room, I knew. Hannah was on the couch, shaking, tears streaming. My mother held her like she might fall apart. My father stood there, already angry, already decided. Tell her, he said. Hannah looked up at me, eyes full of tears. Why do you hate me so much? I froze. What? You've been spreading lies about me, about Adrian, about everything. My mind went blank. I didn't. She pulled out her phone. Screenshots. Messages. Cruel. Ugly. Written under my name. But I didn't write them. I didn't send those. I said. Stop lying, my father shouted. I'm not someone is using my account. And Adrian? Hannah cried. You knew I liked him. He asked me for help with chemistry. That's not what he told his friends. Then she did something I will never forget. She pulled up her sleeve. A bruise. He pushed me, she whispered. My heart dropped. I never touched you. My mother stood up slowly. Emma, if you hurt your sister. I didn't. Then how did she get that bruise? I looked straight at Hannah. And for just a second, her tears disappeared. Not physically, but emotionally. There was something else behind them. Cold. Controlled. You did that yourself, I said. The room exploded. How could you say that? What's wrong with you? I don't even recognize you anymore. And then, my father said it. Something is wrong with you. You're sick. That word, it broke something inside me. And then came the sentence that ended everything. Get out. Outside, thunder shook the sky. I looked at my mother. She looked away. That was it. That was the final confirmation of our family secret. I was never the child they would fight for. I grabbed my jacket. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely put it on. I opened the door. The storm hit me instantly. Cold, violent, unforgiving. I stood there for a moment, just waiting. Waiting for him to call me back. Waiting for her to stop me. Waiting for someone, anyone, to choose me. No one did. So I stepped into the storm, and I didn't know it yet. But that was the night everything in my life began. If this story is pulling you in already, take a second to hit like and tell me in the comments. Have you ever felt like your own family didn't believe you? Because what happened next almost killed me. The rain hit me like ice the second I stepped outside. Within seconds, I was soaked. Not just wet-drenched, like the storm was trying to erase me the same way my father just had. I stood on the porch longer than I should have. Not because I didn't know where to go, but because I was still waiting. Waiting for the door to open. Waiting for my father to come out and say he didn't mean it. Waiting for my mother to call my name. Waiting for someone, just one person, to choose me. The door never opened. So I walked. At first, I didn't even think. I just moved. The rain blurred everything, the streetlights, the sidewalks, the houses I had passed 1,000 times. It all looked different now. Distant. Like I had already been removed from that world. My phone buzzed in my hand. 8% battery. I tried calling Mila. No answer. Noah. Straight to voicemail. Evelyn. Ringing. Then silence. It was late. Of course, no one picked up. Everyone was home. Safe. Dry. Warm. I swallowed hard and kept walking. The library was the closest place I could think of. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere I could sit and wait until morning. But when I got there, it was dark. Closed. Locked. I stood under the narrow awning, hugging myself, shaking uncontrollably. Not just from the cold, but from something deeper. Something breaking. Because for the first time in my life, I realized something terrifying. I didn't have anywhere to go. That's when the thoughts started creeping in. Maybe they were right. Maybe something really was wrong with me. Maybe I was too much. Too difficult. Too broken. That's what happens when a family secret goes on long enough. It stops being a secret. It becomes your identity. I pushed myself away from the building. The bus station was a mile away. If I could just make it there, I could sit inside, stay warm, figure something out. One step at a time. My shoes filled with water almost immediately. Every step made a soft, wet sound. My jacket clung to my skin, heavy and cold. The wind kept pushing against me like it wanted me to turn back. Part of me almost did. Part of me almost went back to that door. Knocked. Begged. Apologized for something I didn't do. Just to be let back inside. But then I heard his voice again in my head. I don't need a sick daughter like you. So I kept walking. By the time I reached the intersection near the old gas station, I could barely feel my hands. The crosswalk signal turned white. I stepped forward, and then headlights. Too close. Too fast. A horn exploded through the rain. Brakes screamed. For a split second, everything slowed down. I remember thinking, so this is it. I tried to step back. I wasn't fast enough. The impact threw me sideways. My body slammed against the hood, then hit the pavement hard. My head cracked against the road, and pain burst through my skull like lightning. I couldn't breathe. The world tilted. The rain poured into my mouth, my eyes, my ears. Everything felt wrong, twisted, distant, slipping. Then I heard it. A car door slamming, footsteps splashing toward me. Oh my God! Oh my God! A woman's voice. Panicked. Shaking. She dropped beside me, her hands hovering for a second before finally touching my shoulder. Hey, hey! Can you hear me? I tried to answer. Nothing came out. Stay with me. Don't move. I'm calling 911. Her voice was trembling, but her hands were steady now. Stay with me, okay? What's your name? I forced my lips to move. Emma. Okay, Emma, good, stay with me. She brushed wet hair away from my face. Where are your parents? I need to call them. The question hit me harder than the car. My parents. For a second, I couldn't process the words. Then I whispered the truth I didn't want to say out loud. They don't want me. She froze. What? They kicked me out! My voice broke. Said I was sick. Something shifted in her expression. Not just shock. Not just guilt. Something deeper. Anger. You're not alone, she said firmly. Do you hear me? You are not alone. Sirens echoed in the distance. The sound felt far away. Everything felt far away. I blinked slowly, trying to focus on her face. And then I recognized her. A week earlier, she had stood in front of my classroom as a guest lecturer. She talked about education systems, about students who fall through the cracks, about giving people second chances. After class, I had stayed behind to ask questions. She had looked at me carefully, like she actually saw me. Before leaving, she handed me a card and said, "Don't let anyone dim your light." Now she was kneeling in the rain beside me. "Dr. Eleanor," I whispered. Her eyes widened slightly. "Yes, that's right." I tried to smile. I remember. Her grip tightened gently on my hand. Good. Then you know I don't break promises. I didn't understand what she meant. Not yet. But something about the way she said it made me feel safe. For the first time that night, the sirens got louder. Lights flashed red and blue through the rain. My vision blurred. Everything started fading. "Stay with me," she said again, her voice stronger now. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." Those were the last words I heard. Before everything went black, when I opened my eyes again, the storm was gone. But my life was about to change completely. If you're still here, comment, "I'm still watching." When I opened my eyes again, everything felt wrong. Not painful at first, just heavy. Like my body didn't fully belong to me yet. There was a constant beeping sound somewhere to my left, a dull light above me. The faint smell of antiseptic in the air. Hospital. It took a few seconds for my memory to catch up. The storm, the road, the headlights. And then, the words. "They don't want me." I shut my eyes again for a moment, wishing just for a second that it had all been a nightmare. It wasn't. "Emma?" A voice, soft but steady. I turned my head slightly. She was still there, Dr. Eleanor Bennett, sitting beside my bed. Not scrolling on her phone. Not distracted. Not impatient. Just there. "You're awake," she said gently. I nodded, or at least I tried to. My head throbbed instantly. "Easy," she said, placing a hand lightly on my arm. "You had a pretty bad concussion." My throat felt dry. I tried to speak. "Why, are you still here?" The question came out weaker than I intended. But she heard it, and for a second, just a second, something passed across her face. Not pity. Not obligation. Something deeper. "Because I said I wouldn't leave," she replied simply. I stared at her. Most people say things like that. Very few actually mean them. Before I could say anything else, the door opened. Voices filled the room. Familiar ones. Were her parents. My body tensed instantly. My father. My mother. I didn't even need to open my eyes to recognize the tone. I stayed still. Listened. Watched through barely opened lids. Dr. Eleanor stood up slowly, her entire posture changing. The softness disappeared. What replaced it was something sharp, controlled, powerful. "You're Emma's parents?" she asked. "Yes," my father said quickly. "We came as soon as we heard." A pause. Then Eleanor spoke again, her voice colder now. "Then maybe you can explain something to me." Silence. "Why was your 15-year-old daughter alone outside in the middle of a storm at night?" The air shifted. My father cleared his throat. "That's a family matter." Eleanor didn't move. "A family matter," she repeated slowly. "Your daughter was hit by a car. She could have died. She ran into the road," my father said defensively. "We didn't—" She was soaking wet, shaking, disoriented. Eleanor cut in. "She told me something before she lost consciousness." My heart started pounding. "She said," Eleanor continued, "that her parents didn't want her anymore." Silence. Heavy. Thick. Unavoidable. "That's not true," my mother said quickly, but her voice shook. "She said you called her sick." Another silence. Longer this time. Then a third voice. "Hannah. Small. Fragile." "She's confused," she said. "She probably made it up. She was barely conscious." "No." Eleanor's voice cut through the room like glass. "She wasn't confused." Footsteps. I felt someone shift closer to my bed. "I've spent my entire career working with students," Eleanor continued. "I know the difference between confusion and truth." My chest tightened. For the first time in my life, someone believed me without asking me to prove it. "Now," Eleanor said, "I'd like to speak to a social worker." "That won't be necessary," my father snapped. "We'll handle this." "With all due respect," she replied calmly. "You've handled it enough." The room went quiet again. And then, a new voice. "Police. Sir, we need to ask a few questions." Everything started moving quickly after that. Voices overlapping. Excuses, denials, justifications. But none of it landed the way it used to. Because something had already shifted. For once, they weren't the only ones speaking. And I wasn't the only one being judged. "Everyone out," Eleanor said suddenly. "She's waking up." I forced my eyes open fully this time. Bright light flooded in. Shapes sharpened. I saw my father first. Then my mother. Then Hannah. And for the first time, they looked unsure. Not confident. Not certain. Unsure. "Emma," my mother started. "Out," Eleanor repeated. No hesitation this time. They left. All of them. The door closed. And just like that, it was quiet again. Eleanor sat back down beside me. Her hand found mine warm, steady. "You're safe now," she said. I wanted to believe her, but safe was not a word I recognized anymore. "Why are you helping me?" I whispered. She looked at me for a long moment, then said something I would never forget. "Because someone once helped me." I blinked. "When I was 17, she continued, "my own family threw me out." My heart stopped. I had nowhere to go. No one to call. Her voice didn't break, but I felt the weight behind it. "A teacher took me in, gave me a place to stay, gave me a future." She squeezed my hand slightly. "I wouldn't be here if she hadn't." Tears filled my eyes before I even realized it. "I see myself in you, Emma," she said quietly. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. Later that day, a woman named Olivia ironically came to speak with me, a social worker. Kind eyes, gentle voice. She asked questions carefully, not like an interrogation, like she actually wanted to understand. I told her everything, Hannah. The lies, the pattern, the night. When I finished, she didn't rush to respond. She just nodded slowly. "Emma," she said, "you don't have to go back there." The words felt unreal. "If you don't feel safe, we can arrange something else." Something else. I had never been offered that before. Before I could ask what that meant, the door opened again. Eleanor stepped in. She can stay with me. The room went still. I turned to her. What? She walked closer, calm, certain. Temporary foster placement, she explained to Olivia. I've already started the paperwork. I stared at her. You don't even know me. She smiled softly. Why would you do that? My voice cracked. Why would anyone choose me? That's what I meant. That's what I had always meant. She sat down beside me again. Because someone chose me, she said. And then more quietly, and now it's my turn. I broke. Completely. Not from pain. Not from fear. But from something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Relief. For the first time, someone wasn't choosing me because they had to. They were choosing me because they wanted to. And that changed everything. I didn't go back to that house. Not the next day, not the week after, not ever again. Instead, a few days later, I walked into a completely different life. One that felt so unfamiliar at first that even the smallest things made me uneasy, like the quiet, like the way no one raised their voice, like the way the air itself didn't feel heavy with judgment, and for the first time in years, I stepped into a space where I wasn't waiting for something bad to happen. Eleanor's house wasn't big, but it felt safe in a way I didn't yet understand. With soft lights in the evening, shelves full of books that had clearly been read and loved, and a kind of calm that didn't need to be explained. And when she showed me the room I would stay in, she didn't say, "This is temporary," or "Don't get too comfortable." She just opened the door and said, "This is yours." And that sentence alone almost broke something inside me, because no one had ever given me a space and meant it. At first, I didn't know how to exist there. I apologized constantly, for everything, for using the bathroom too long, for eating too much, for making noise when I walked, for breathing too loudly at night, and every time I said sorry, Eleanor would either smile softly or ignore it completely, never reinforcing that reflex I had been trained into, never making me feel like I owed her something for simply being allowed to stay. One evening, while we were washing dishes together, I dropped a spoon and immediately said, "I'm sorry," almost automatically, and she paused for just a second before saying something that stayed with me long after that moment passed. She said, "Emma, you don't have to apologize for existing here." And I remember freezing with my hands still wet, because I didn't even realize how deeply that fear had rooted itself in me until someone named it out loud. The first few weeks were the hardest, not because anything bad was happening, but because nothing bad was happening. And when you grow up in an environment where tension is constant, peace feels suspicious, like something temporary, like something that will disappear if you relax too much. So I stayed alert, watching, waiting, expecting the tone to change, expecting disappointment to show up, expecting the same pattern to repeat itself in a different house. But it didn't. Days passed, then weeks, and slowly, something inside me began to loosen. Not all at once, not dramatically, but in small, quiet ways, like the way I stopped checking the clock every time I laughed, or the way I started eating without asking if it was okay, or the way I could sit in the living room and read without feeling like I needed to earn that time. I transferred to a new school shortly after, and that, in itself, felt like stepping into a version of life where my past didn't follow me, where no one knew about Hannah, or the lies, or the night I was thrown out. And for the first time, I was just Emma, not the difficult one, not the problem, just a student who showed up, did her work, and slowly, quietly, started to believe that maybe she was capable of more than survival. Eleanor didn't push me. She didn't pressure me to be perfect, but she exposed me to things I had never even imagined before, taking me to university lectures, introducing me to people who spoke about ideas instead of gossip, showing me that intelligence wasn't something to hide, but something to grow, and every time I doubted myself, which was often, she would say, "If you don't step into your potential, someone else will define it for you." And I didn't fully understand that at first, but I held on to it anyway. For the first time, I had space to think, not just react, not just survive. Think. And in that space, something started to rebuild. I studied harder than I ever had before, not because I was trying to prove my family wrong anymore, but because I wanted to prove something to myself, that I wasn't broken, that I wasn't too much, that I wasn't what they had decided I was, and every good grade, Every small achievement, every moment of clarity became a piece of evidence that the version of me they believed in was never the truth. It was just a story. A story built on a family secret that had been allowed to grow unchecked. A story where one child was protected at all costs, and the other was sacrificed quietly to keep the illusion intact. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that what happened to me wasn't just about one lie or one night. It was about years of conditioning, years of choosing comfort over truth, years of ignoring what was easier to ignore. And for the first time, I stopped asking, why didn't they love me enough? And started asking, why did I stay in a place that never saw me? That shift, that changed everything. By the time I reached my final year of high school, I wasn't the same girl who stood in the rain waiting for a door to open. I was someone who had started building her own doors, her own future, her own identity, separate from everything that had tried to define her before. And when I received a full scholarship to Ashford Heights University, I didn't run home to tell anyone. I sat in Eleanor's kitchen, and I told her, and she smiled like it mattered. That was enough. That was more than enough. College changed me in ways I didn't expect, not just academically, but emotionally, mentally, in the way I saw the world and my place in it. And for the first time, I started understanding systems, understanding how people fall through cracks that were never meant to hold them, understanding how many stories like mine exist quietly behind closed doors, hidden under the same kind of family secret that no one wants to expose. And that's when the idea came to me. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but slowly, like something that had always been there waiting to be named. A program, a scholarship, a way to help students who had been pushed aside, ignored, abandoned, just like I had been, not to save them, but to give them what I was given, a chance, a second chance. I didn't tell anyone about it at first, not because I was afraid, but because I wasn't sure if I was allowed to dream that big. But Eleanor was. She always was. You're not just going to survive this, she told me one night over dinner, her voice calm but certain. You're going to turn it into something that matters. And for the first time, I believed her. I started working on it. Late nights, early mornings, draft after draft, proposal after proposal, rejection after rejection. But I didn't stop, because every time I thought about giving up, I remembered that girl standing in the rain, and I knew if someone hadn't stopped for her, she wouldn't be here. And if I could become that person for someone else, even just one person, then everything that happened to me wouldn't be meaningless. And slowly, it started to work. One school agreed, then another, then more. And before I even realized it, I wasn't just rebuilding my life anymore. I was building something bigger than myself. Something that didn't need my past to justify its existence. Something that stood on its own. And somewhere in the middle of all that, I stopped being the girl who was thrown out. I became the woman who walked forward. And I had no idea that one day, I would walk back into their world, not as who they remembered, but as someone they would never recognize. I didn't expect my past to find me again so quietly. There was no warning, no dramatic sign, just a normal morning in my office, a stack of scholarship applications on my desk, coffee getting cold beside me, and a knock on the door that sounded no different from any other day, until Jonathan stepped in, holding a folder, and said something that made everything inside me stop for just a second. You've been invited to speak, as the keynote speaker. I looked up, distracted at first, not fully processing it, because invitations like that had started becoming more common, conferences, panels, university talks, and I had learned how to accept them without overthinking. Which university? I asked. He hesitated. Just for a moment, then said it. Brook Hollow State. And just like that, everything came back. Not slowly, not gently, all at once. Because that wasn't just a university. That was her university. Hannah, my sister. The girl who had erased me so completely from her life that for years, I didn't even exist in her story anymore. I leaned back in my chair, staring at nothing, feeling something old and heavy rise in my chest, something I thought I had already dealt with, already buried, already moved past. Do you want me to decline it? Jonathan asked carefully. And I could hear the question behind the question. Do you want to go back to that world? I didn't answer right away. Because the truth is, I didn't know. That night, I sat in Eleanor's kitchen, just like I had so many times before, with a cup of tea in my hands and that same familiar quiet around me, and I told her everything, not just about the invitation, but about the fear underneath it, the part of me that didn't want to reopen something that had taken years to heal. I don't want to turn this into revenge, I said finally, my voice softer than I expected. Eleanor didn't interrupt. She never did. She just listened, the way she always had, like every word mattered, like I mattered. "What do you want?" she asked. I thought about it. Longer this time. And when I answered, it surprised even me. "I want the truth to stand in the open," I said slowly, choosing each word carefully. Not to hurt them, but so I don't have to carry it anymore. Eleanor nodded once, then said something that grounded me instantly. "Then go as who you are now," she said, her voice calm, steady, certain. "Not as who they made you feel like." So I accepted. And for the next 2 weeks, I wrote my speech. Not as a victim. Not as someone asking to be understood. But as someone who had lived through something real, something painful, something that shaped her, and turned it into something meaningful. The morning of the ceremony came faster than I expected. I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my navy suit, my hands steady but my chest tight. Not with fear exactly, but with something close to it, something like anticipation mixed with memory. Eleanor stood behind me, gently fixing the collar, just like she had done so many times before, and when I met her eyes in the mirror, she smiled. "You don't need them to see you," she said softly. "I know," I replied. But deep down, a part of me still wondered what it would feel like. To be seen. The campus was full when I arrived. Students everywhere. Laughing, taking pictures, fixing their caps, hugging their families. The air filled with excitement, pride, beginnings, and for a moment, I felt like I was standing outside of it, looking in. Because I had never had this. Not like this. Not with them. Backstage, everything moved quickly. Faculty adjusting robes, microphones being tested, names being checked, the controlled chaos of something important about to begin. I picked up the program. And there it was. Hannah Carter, row 3, communications. I stared at her name for a second longer than necessary, then closed the booklet. Because it didn't matter anymore. Not the way it used to. 5 minutes, Jonathan said. I nodded. My heart started beating faster now. Not from fear. From knowing. Knowing that in just a few minutes, everything would collide. From behind the curtain, I could see the audience. Hundreds of people. Families. Students. And then, I saw them. My parents. Sitting in the middle rows. Looking older, quieter, still unaware. Still comfortable in the version of reality they had built. And then I saw her. Hannah. Cap and gown. Smiling. Laughing with the girl next to her. Completely at ease. Completely unaware. And for a brief moment, I felt nothing. No anger, no pain, just distance. 13 years of distance. Then my name was called. "Please welcome, Emma Carter." Applause filled the room. Polite. Expected. Normal. I stepped out into the light, and everything changed. At first, Hannah was still clapping, smiling, not really looking. Then her eyes lifted and landed on me. The change was instant. Her hands stopped mid-clap. Her smile disappeared. Her face went pale. Recognition didn't come slowly. It hit her all at once. Like a shock. Like something impossible becoming real in front of her eyes. Behind her, my parents were still clapping, still unaware, for a few seconds more. Until I reached the podium, adjusted the microphone, and spoke. "Good morning." My voice carried through the entire auditorium. Clear. Steady. Unshaken. And that was the moment my father looked up. Really looked. I saw it happen. Confusion. Recognition. Shock. My mother's hand went to her chest. Hannah didn't move at all. She just stared. Like she had stopped breathing. I smiled. Not cold, not cruel, just calm. Today, I want to talk about resilience. I began, my voice smooth, measured, natural, about what happens when someone loses everything and still finds a way forward. The room quieted, and I could feel it. I thought everything would end at that doorway, that once I walked away, it would all just settle, fade, close. But the truth doesn't work like that, especially not when it's been buried for 13 years and suddenly exposed in front of hundreds of people who weren't supposed to know it ever existed. Because what happened next was something I didn't plan, and honestly, something I didn't expect. It started with a video. Someone in the audience had recorded my speech, just a phone held quietly in the middle of the crowd. Nothing professional, nothing intentional, just a moment captured, and within hours, it was posted online, first in a small group, then shared again, and by the next day, it wasn't just a university moment anymore. It was everywhere. Thousands of views turned into tens of thousands. Comments started pouring in. I cried watching this. This feels so real. Family isn't always safe. I needed this more than you know. And with every share, the story spread. Not the full story, not the details, but enough. Enough for people to ask questions. Enough for people to connect the dots. Enough for the family secret that had been hidden so carefully for years to stop being a secret at all. At first, I tried to ignore it. I focused on work, on the scholarship applications stacking higher on my desk, on the emails from students who needed help, on the program that had become something real, something bigger than my past. But it kept reaching me anyway. Messages, notifications, requests. People wanted interviews. Podcasts wanted my story. Articles wanted details. And every time I said the same thing. Talk about the program, not my family. Because I wasn't interested in turning my pain into content. That wasn't the point. But while I was trying to move forward, something else was happening behind me. Hannah's world was changing. Not loudly, not dramatically, but steadily, quietly, and painfully. I didn't see it directly at first. I heard about it, through small things, through people who still had connections to that world, through fragments that reached me whether I wanted them to or not. She lost a few friends. People are asking questions. Things are different now. And then one day, I received an email. Not from Hannah, from someone else, one of her former friends. Subject line: "You deserve to know." I hesitated before opening it, but something in me needed to understand. Inside were screenshots, group chats, messages between people who had once been close to her. I can't believe she lied about her sister being dead. That's not normal. I don't trust her anymore. I feel like everything she ever said could be fake. I stared at the screen for a long time. Not because I felt satisfied, but because I felt something else. Something complicated. Because this wasn't revenge. This wasn't something I had done. This was just what happens when truth shows up and stays. Hannah's social media went quiet after that. No more smiling photos. No more perfect captions. No more family first posts. Just silence. And that silence said more than anything she had ever posted before. My parents tried to reach me again. Calls, emails, long messages filled with regret. We didn't know how bad it was. We thought we were doing the right thing. We were trying to protect the family. That line, it stayed with me. Protect the family. Because what they really meant was protect the image. Protect the version of reality that didn't require accountability. That was the final layer of the family secret. Not just what happened, but why it was allowed to happen. Because it was easier to keep things looking normal than to face what was actually broken. One afternoon, about 2 weeks later, my phone buzzed again. Another email from Hannah. Short this time, no long explanation, no attempt to justify anything. Just this: "I know I don't deserve anything from you. I just wanted to say I understand now and I'm sorry." I read it once, then again, and for a moment I just sat there. Because something had shifted. Not in the situation, but in me. There was no anger left. No need to respond. No need to reopen anything. Just a quiet understanding that some people learn too late. And some damage doesn't get undone. I didn't reply. Not because I hated her, but because I didn't need anything from her anymore. And that was the real difference. That's what healing looks like. Not closure from them. Closure from yourself. A few days later, I was sitting across from Eleanor at dinner, the same table where so many quiet, life-changing conversations had happened, and she looked at me carefully before asking, "How are you feeling?" I thought about it, really thought about it, because the easy answer would have been, "Fine." But this wasn't easy. "I feel lighter," I said slowly. She nodded. "Like something I carried for years isn't mine anymore." She smiled slightly. "That's because it never was." And that hit deeper than anything else. Because she was right. It was never mine to carry. The blame. The shame. The story they built about me. None of it belonged to me. And for the first time, I fully let it go. Not because everything was fixed, but because I didn't need it anymore. And that's when I realized something important. This wasn't a story about revenge. It was never about exposing them. It was about releasing myself. And sometimes, that's the only ending you actually need. The shift, the attention, the weight of what was about to be said. 13 years ago, I continued, a 15-year-old girl was told she didn't belong in her own home anymore. Silence. Real silence. She was called broken. She was told something was wrong with her. And one night, in the middle of a storm, she was told to leave. I didn't look at them. Not yet. I didn't need to. Because I could feel it. The tension. The realization. The beginning of understanding. She walked alone that night, I said, my voice steady, unshaking, with nowhere to go. And before she could find safety, she was hit by a car. A ripple moved through the audience. But I kept going. Someone stopped. A pause. Someone chose to help her, when her own family didn't. And then I looked up. Straight ahead. Not hiding. Not hesitating. That girl was me. The entire room went still. Completely. And in that moment they saw me. Not the version they remembered. Not the version they erased. But who I had become. When the applause faded and the ceremony continued, I stepped off the stage with a strange kind of calm. The kind that doesn't come from victory, but from finally saying something that has lived inside you for too long. And even though the room was still buzzing with energy, with whispers and reactions and people trying to process what they had just heard, I felt something inside me settle in a way I had never experienced before. For 13 years, the truth had belonged only to me. And now, it didn't anymore. I stayed backstage for a few minutes, not because I was hiding, but because I needed a moment to breathe, to let my body catch up with what had just happened. And just as I was about to leave through the side exit, Jonathan approached me, his expression careful, almost hesitant. "They're asking to see you," he said. I didn't need to ask who. I already knew. Eleanor stepped closer immediately, her presence grounding, steady as always. "You don't have to," she said quietly. And she meant it. That's what made the choice different this time. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't being pushed. I was choosing. I exhaled slowly. "I know," I said. Then after a short pause, "But I want to. Not for closure. Not for revenge. But because I didn't want anything unfinished anymore." We walked toward the side entrance together, the hallway quieter now, the sounds of celebration fading behind us, replaced by something heavier, something more personal. And when I stepped outside, I saw them immediately. My parents. Standing there. Waiting. Hannah just behind them. For a moment, no one moved. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't explosive. It was still. Like time had slowed just enough for all of us to feel exactly what this moment meant. My father was the first to speak. "Emma," my name sounded unfamiliar coming from him. Like it didn't belong in his mouth anymore, like it had been sitting unused for too many years. You're really here?" my mother said, her voice already breaking. "I've always been here," I replied, "just not where you chose to look." They both flinched slightly. And I noticed something then. They looked older. Not just physically, but heavier. Like the years had not been as easy as they had pretended. We didn't know, my father said quickly, almost defensively, like he was trying to fix something that couldn't be undone. We didn't know it was you speaking today. I'm sure you didn't, I said calmly, because if they had known, they probably wouldn't have come. Or maybe they would have, but not for the right reasons. My mother stepped forward slightly, her hands trembling, her eyes searching my face like she was trying to find the version of me she used to control. You look good, she whispered. I am, I said. And I meant it. Not because of them, but despite them. Silence stretched between us again. Then my father said the words I had imagined 1,000 times, but never believed I would actually hear. We were wrong. I held his gaze. Not angry, not soft, just present. We made a mistake, my mother added, her voice shaking more now, tears slipping down her cheeks. A terrible mistake, and we've regretted it every day. I let that sit for a moment. Then I spoke. Slowly, clearly. You didn't make a mistake, I said. They both looked confused. You made a choice. That landed differently. I could see it. Because a mistake is something accidental. A choice is something you own. You chose to believe her. I continued, my voice steady, not raised, not emotional, just honest. You chose to ignore me. You chose to call me sick, and you chose to send me out into a storm. My father's face tightened. My mother covered her mouth. Hannah looked down. You could have stopped it, I said softly, looking at my mother now. You could have said one word, and you didn't. Tears streamed down her face. I was scared, she whispered. I know, I said. That was the truth. She was scared. But not of losing me. Of upsetting Hannah. And that was everything. My father took a step forward. What can we do now? He asked, his voice breaking, the confidence gone, the control gone, just a man standing in front of the consequences of his own decisions. Can we fix this? And there it was. The question I had once needed so badly. I thought about it. Not for long, but long enough to be sure. No, I said. Not harsh, not cold, just final. They both froze. What do you mean no? My mother asked, her voice fragile, desperate. I mean, there's nothing to fix, I replied, my tone still calm, still grounded. You can't go back to that night and choose differently. My father's shoulders dropped slightly. But we can try, he insisted. We can start again. We're not a family anymore. The words came out gently, but they didn't soften the truth. Hannah finally spoke then. I'm sorry, she said, her voice small, raw, nothing like the performance she used to give. No control, no manipulation, just exposed. I was jealous, she continued, struggling to keep her voice steady. I lied about everything, the messages, the bruise, all of it, and I thought it would just get you in trouble. You didn't think it would go that far. I finished for her. She nodded, tears falling. But it did, I said. And you let it. That was the part she couldn't escape. Because the lie didn't end that night. It continued. For years, I told people you were dead, she whispered. That I hadn't expected to hear out loud. I blinked once. Slowly. You what? It was easier, she said, her voice breaking. Easier than explaining what I did. I let out a quiet breath. Not anger, just understanding. Not forgiveness. Understanding. That's the real problem, I said softly. It was always easier. Easier to lie. Easier to ignore. Easier to erase me. And for the first time, they had no answer. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of everything that had never been said before. My father looked at me one last time. Can you forgive us? He asked. I nodded. Yes, I said. All three of them looked up at once. Relief. Hope. Something fragile starting to rebuild. But I wasn't finished. I forgive you. I continued, my voice still calm, still steady. Because I don't want to carry this anymore. A pause, then, but that doesn't mean you get to be part of my life. And just like that, the hope disappeared. My mother broke down completely. Hannah covered her face. My father stood there, silent, finally understanding what forgiveness actually meant. Not access, not restoration, peace. For me, not for them. Eleanor stepped beside me then, not saying anything, not needing to, just there. The way she had always been, the way they never were. I turned slightly. "Let's go," I said, and we walked away. Not fast. Not dramatically. Just forward. And this time, I didn't look back. Because I didn't need to anymore. A year after that graduation, my life looked nothing like it used to. And for the first time, that wasn't something I had to fight for every single day, it was something I could simply live in. The Second Chance program had grown beyond what I originally imagined, expanding into more universities, reaching more students, creating more opportunities, and every time I read an application or sat across from a student who thought they had already been left behind, I saw pieces of myself in them. Not in a painful way anymore, but in a way that reminded me why I started all of this in the first place. Not to prove anything, not to get back at anyone, but to make sure that someone else wouldn't have to stand alone in the rain wondering if they deserved to exist. That part of my life felt clear. Steady. Right. But there were still moments when the past tried to reach back. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just quietly. My parents still sent messages sometimes. Shorter now. Less desperate. More aware. "We hope you're doing well. We're proud of you. We think about you often." I read them. I didn't respond. Not because I wanted to punish them, but because I had finally understood something that took me years to learn. You don't owe access to people just because they're sorry. That lesson changed everything. Hannah wrote too. Not often. Every few months. Simple messages. "I hope you're okay. I'm working on myself. I understand if you never reply." And for a long time, I didn't know what I felt when I saw her name on my screen. Not anger. Not sadness. Something quieter. Something like distance. Because forgiveness had already happened, but connection hadn't. And sometimes, those are two very different things. Eleanor, on the other hand, never had to ask for a place in my life. She had built it. Day by day, choice by choice. In the way she showed up, in the way she listened, in the way she never once made me feel like I had to earn my place beside her. She became something I didn't even realize I had been missing. Not a replacement. Not a substitute. A real mother. One evening, sitting across from her at the same kitchen table where everything had once begun, I realized something so simple and yet so powerful that it almost made me laugh. I wasn't surviving anymore. I was living. Not carefully. Not quietly. Fully. And that difference is everything. People sometimes ask me if I regret that night. The storm. The pain. The accident. The moment everything broke. And my answer is always the same. I regret that a 15-year-old girl had to go through that. I regret that she had to learn what rejection feels like from the people who were supposed to protect her. But I don't regret what came after. Because that night didn't end my life. It redirected it. It forced me out of a place that was never going to let me grow into who I was meant to become. And that's the part most people don't talk about. Sometimes the thing that feels like the worst moment of your life is actually the moment you stop living someone else's version of you and start becoming your own. I still drive past that old house sometimes. Not often. Not with pain. Just curiosity. I sit there for a few minutes, looking at the door I once stood in front of, soaked in rain, waiting for someone to let me back in. And I think about that girl, the girl who believed she had nowhere to go, the girl who thought being rejected meant she wasn't worth staying for. And I wish I could tell her something. Not to go back, not to try harder, not to be better, but something much simpler. You're going to be okay, even if they never choose you. Because that's the truth. And not just for me. For anyone listening to this right now, Not every family is safe. Not every home is loving. And not every person who is supposed to protect you will. That's not your fault. And it doesn't define your worth. You get to decide who stays in your life. You get to decide what you carry forward. And you get to decide when something ends, even if it's something that once meant everything. Because real family isn't about who you're born to. It's about who shows up, who stays, who sees you clearly, and chooses you anyway. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is walk away from what hurts you and build something better, something real, something yours. So if you're listening to this and you feel like you've been left behind, misunderstood, or made to feel like you're not enough, hear me clearly. You are not broken. You are not too much. And you are not alone. You can rebuild your life, you can choose your peace, and you can become someone your past never believed you could be. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share where you're watching from, because sometimes, the story someone else needs to hear is the one you almost didn't tell.